Actually Speaking, Episode 8, I Statements. Want to know how to live skeptically and still have friends? So do I. Let's figure it out. Actually Speaking, a podcast that explores the human side of skepticism, critical thinking, and the skills we need to make it through the day. Hi everyone, and welcome to Episode 8 of Actually Speaking, a podcast that sets the science aside and explores the human side of skepticism. My name is Mike Meraz, and today we're going to learn about a technique that allows us to sculpt our speech in a way that diffuses conflict while increasing assertiveness. We'll be exploring the topic of I statements. I've always been impressed by people who are able to tackle the most controversial issues and discuss or debate them in a way that keeps the expected conflict under control and allows people of opposing positions to discuss their differences calmly. It's not an easy thing to do. We see it in a variety of ways in many areas of our life. Teachers helping students resolve their differences with classmates, residence life staff at any university helping roommates find a common ground within their living arrangement, or marriage counselors tackling the monumental task of guiding a strained relationship back to a position of listening and constructive engagement, or a journalist who interviews a hostile guest and is able to keep the conversation going longer than 5 minutes without it devolving into a fight. For me, that's impressive. And what's amazing is that there are actually skills behind these tasks which anyone can learn and apply to our own communication with others. When I was younger, I really thought the ability to communicate effectively was more a reflection of your personality. In those days, I equated good communication with simply being charismatic or having a pleasant personality, something you were born with. In part because I had a very strong religious upbringing in which the people who were listened to and respected were those that preached the loudest. People who already had a position of authority, were most decisive about what others should or shouldn't do, and were unwavering in their position of what was right or wrong. But that's not good communication. That doesn't promote growth. It simply promotes obedience and has more in common with bad marketing than actual interpersonal and communication skills. Yet it's probably close to the perception of communication that most of us have by default. We're exposed to so much hostile and aggressive human interactions that we forget what healthy and constructive communication is actually like. We think it's a competition, a game that can be won or lost. And thanks to our media, we often equate it with good entertainment. But it's not. Effective interpersonal communication is a respectful exchange of information, thoughts, feelings, and ideas that help us better understand ourselves and each other. It's that simple. But like most simple concepts, it's easier said than done. Along the way in this podcast, we've explored a variety of skills needed in order to promote effective communication and growth in others. We've looked at realistic goal setting, the promotion of curiosity and caution, obstacles to critical thinking, the limitations presented by our own human nature, and how to promote growth through a balance of challenge and support. These are all components of an effective communication tool set. Today, we're going to add one more tool to our collection of skills. We're going to be talking about I statements, a tool that allows us to sculpt our speech in a way that diffuses defensiveness and hostility while promoting trust, cooperation, and growth. I statements are simply statements which convey our own thoughts, experiences, and decisions without criticizing others for not conforming to our point of view. In other words, they inform without attacking. Now, there's a counterpart to I statements which are called you statements. You statements also convey information, but in a judgmental fashion, which creates defensiveness and resistance. Now, obviously, if our goal is to educate, promote critical thinking, and strengthen our relationships with others, the use of I statements is a necessity. So what do these statements look like? Well, it's helpful to look at them together. So let's start with you statements. Think for a moment how you would feel hearing these statements. 1. You're crazy if you think homeopathy is a viable health alternative. 2. You're putting your kids at risk by not vaccinating. 3. Did you even read the article I sent you? Chances are you felt defensive, a little angry, and perhaps distrustful. You statements very easily create defensiveness and emotional resistance. They are perceived as an attack, a judgment, and very often shut down communication. Once communication is shut down, no progress is made, no matter how strongly the facts lean in your favor. Now, contrast these statements with their I statement equivalents. 1. I don't feel comfortable treating homeopathy as a viable health alternative. 2. I feel much safer vaccinating my children. 3. I feel so much better and informed having read this article. You see the difference? If you look closely, you can see that the same information was conveyed by each statement, but the manner in which it was shared significantly impacts how that information is received. The you statements are much more likely to stop the flow of communication, while the I statements have the potential to promote further communication, build trust, and increase cooperation. So, why do I statements work? I statements work because they keep the focus of our communication on our own thoughts, feelings, and choices while protecting others from blame and judgment. It's very hard to carry on an argument when I statements are used. Not impossible, but very difficult. But they also work because they're a form of self-disclosure, which makes us appear vulnerable. And that vulnerability very often diffuses arguments. We're less likely to become defensive when we feel someone is opening up about themselves. In fact, we can often feel protective and sympathetic, even if we disagree, because we interpret the statement as a declaration of trust. For example, a parent who smokes would have a very different response to a child who said, "When are you going to give up that disgusting habit?" compared to a child that said, "I'm scared that we're going to lose you like my friend lost his dad who smoked." The first statement, a you statement, might be dismissed, but the second, an I statement, is likely to produce an emotional response and cooperation. Or take a married couple who find themselves arguing far too often. One partner might feel defensive to hear the other say, "You need to calm down and talk to me rationally and politely." Whereas that same partner might feel far more sympathetic and cooperative if they hear, "I feel too scared to share what I'm feeling when yelling is involved." I statements work because they share information about ourselves in a way that shows vulnerability. That vulnerability builds trust, is non-threatening, and encourages cooperation. So, how do we construct an effective I statement? It's actually a little more involved than the examples I've shown so far. The best way to learn how to form an I statement is by following a simple formula you can use to put the basic pieces together. It's simple, but it's effective. But let me say up front that this formula is for learning purposes only. It's simply a model by which to practice constructing I statements in order to grasp their overall structure and components. Using the formula in actual conversation isn't recommended. In fact, it would simply make your statements appear artificial and fake. Use the formula to learn. But real-world I statements are going to take some time and effort to utilize effectively. With a bit of practice, the skill will develop, the formula will disappear, and the I statements will become intuitive. Now, in its simplest form, an I statement is a statement which begins with an I, just like a you statement is a statement that begins with the word you. However, this isn't always detailed enough, since it's very easy to create a disguised you statement. For example, "I think you're an idiot." It starts with an I, but far from an I statement. So more structure is needed in the formula. So instead, try this formula. Now, bear with me. This is actually easier in visual form, but the formula statement goes like this. I feel blank when blank because blank. Would you consider blank? See? A visual will be much more helpful. So let me say it again with something generic filling in the blanks. I feel frustrated when plans are made without me because my input is never heard. Would you consider getting everyone's input before making plans? That's an effective I statement. And it has 4 components. 1, a feeling. 2, a cause. 3, a consequence. And 4, a compromise. The first 2, a feeling and a cause, are always needed in an I statement. But the last 2 a consequence, and a compromise are flexible. Think of this as more of a checklist for an effective I statement rather than a strict formula. So let's break down these 4 components so we understand them. The first one, I feel, is a statement of your feelings on a matter. I feel angry, frustrated, concerned, discouraged, helpless, etc. Use an actual statement of feeling here and avoid things like, I feel that you're wrong, or I feel like you're not listening, which really aren't statements of feelings at all. The second component, when, this is important because it identifies the behavior that is causing the feeling. This is a non-blaming statement of fact, and often the hardest part because it's where the blame usually wants to come in. I feel frustrated when plans are made without me is much more effective than saying, I feel frustrated when you ignore my input. Third component, because. This is a concrete effect or consequence of your situation. It's an optional component. It may not be needed, but it's an opportunity to further clarify and present your own position. I feel frustrated when plans are made without me because my input is never heard. It reveals how the behavior or actions are impacting you. Now the last component, number 4, would you consider? This offers a compromise and presents reasonable ideas on how to resolve the problem or work through an issue. I often like to call this component the escape route because it offers a person a way out of the situation which they may not otherwise see. And escape routes are useful in almost every situation, I statement or not. There are plenty of variations on this basic formula and the way that it's worded, but all of the variations will cover the same basic components: a feeling, a cause for that feeling, a consequence, and a compromise. As long as your statement can be revealing of your thoughts and feelings without blaming or judging another person's position, the variations shouldn't impact its effectiveness. Okay, so with the components explained, let me give you a few formula-based examples along with some possible real-life phrasing. Of course, what you come up with might be very different, but if done correctly, it should be just as effective. I'd encourage you to take each of these formula-based examples and try translating them in a way that you'd feel comfortable using in a conversation. First example. Here's the formula. I feel concerned when I hear that kids are not vaccinated because of a fear that it might cause autism. Would you consider reading some material from a science-based source? Now remember, the formula is only a learning tool. It helps you formulate and organize and collect your thoughts. The real-life version in conversation might be, I completely understand how hard and confusing it can be to know what is in the best interest of our kids. I've looked into the issue myself and decided to vaccinate. In the end, I simply felt more confident basing my decision on sound medical research and facts. If you're interested, let me know. I have some great reliable sources of information I can share. You see? No sign of the formula, but the effect and the components are all present. Okay, another example. Here's the formula. I feel rejected when I'm expected to pray at the holiday dinner, because not doing so would be uncomfortable for others. Would you consider modifying the prayer to acknowledge my atheism? Again, the formula is a learning tool. One possible way this could be stated in a conversation would be, I'm not sure we'll be sticking around for the entire holiday party this year. Ever since sharing my atheism, it seems that the events have become more religious. I don't want to deny anyone their traditions, but I also don't want to feel alienated and rejected among my own family. It'd be nice if we could avoid that, but if not, I think we'll just shorten our visit this year. Third example. Here's the formula. I feel frustrated when I see skeptics arguing amongst themselves over minor details of definition, because it undermines our sense of community and common goals. Would you consider having certain debates in a more private setting? Actually, I don't think that one needs much tweaking. It stands pretty well on its own. As you can see, I statements take practice, lots of practice. This isn't the type of skill that you can learn about passively through this podcast and implement easily. It'll take time. But once you become comfortable recognizing and using I statements, you'll find that you've mastered one of the most powerful communication tools and most applicable for a variety of situations. They help keep the flow of information open between individuals with differing perspectives. They diffuse defensiveness or hostility in others or ourselves when those perspectives clash. They assist with conflict resolution and problem solving. And they're the basis for assertiveness training and assist us in speaking up and being heard by minimizing risk and maximizing cooperation. By their very nature, I statements are a form of self-expression which lead to greater communication and understanding. That, in turn, builds trust and can cause others to change their behavior by their own choice, which is exactly the type of growth we want to promote. In a class, this is where we normally stop, break off into small groups, and practice forming I statements in a variety of scenarios. But since this is a podcast, the responsibility is going to have to be yours to practice the skill. But I will give you some direction in how to go about doing that. First, take some time over the next few days and simply try to find examples of I statements and you statements. Listen to people who are talking, arguing, or debating, and see if you can detect which statements are being used. Find people you trust and respect and analyze their speech and style of communication. Similarly, find someone you don't enjoy listening to and analyze their speech. Pay attention to heated Twitter, Facebook, or comment threads and see which statements are being used and how others are reacting to them. Visit a few of your favorite and least favorite blogs and read a few articles and posts. And look for I statements. You won't likely see the formula in any of these places, but you should be able to recognize I statement components fairly easily now that you know what you're looking for. With enough observation, you're likely to begin seeing the pattern. The people who are having the most success communicating, educating, and reaching out to others are those who have incorporated the art of I statements into their style of communication. And if they're really good at it, you won't see a hint of the formula at all, but the effect will be clear. Those that focus on you statements, well, you can usually tell those because there isn't usually much education happening or reaching out to new people. They tend to be mostly focused on preaching to the converted and rallying their base into a frenzy. Personally, I'm not sure who benefits. Second, once you've done a fair amount of observation, try it yourself. Take familiar topics that traditionally lead to heated confrontations and try formulating I statement responses. Go dig up an old email, a comment, or post that led to an argument and see if you could restate it using I statements. Use the formula at first, but then get rid of it for the actual conversation. Better yet, if you're feeling brave, find someone who traditionally disagrees with you, but someone you can trust, and try talking to them about a difficult issue using nothing more than I statements for 15 minutes. Ask them how they felt speaking with you compared to previous conversations or arguments. I guarantee you'll learn a lot from that experience. It's hard, and practicing I statements can feel very silly at the beginning, but with practice, it becomes intuitive, and your speech as a whole will begin to naturally take on a completely different tone. Eventually, it won't be just about one or two lines, but the whole manner in which you communicate will reflect a new style of self-expression, a vulnerability which builds trust, a non-threatening tone that promotes curiosity instead of defensiveness. People will begin to listen, and the process of educating can kick into high gear. The great communicators that you're exposed to already have and utilize this skill. It's very easy to spot once you know what you're looking for. I statements aren't the only tool they use, but it's one of the most effective. What we need to remember is that good communication isn't just about charisma or personality. We aren't just born good communicators. It's about skills, clearly definable skills which anyone can learn and effectively utilize with practice. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at the counterpart to I statements and explore active listening skills. It's not as passive a process as you might think. If you have questions, comments, or would like to share your own tips and ideas on living skeptically, send them to actuallyspeaking@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/factually. Thanks for listening.